So the other day I was talking to somebody about numbers and tracking progress, and they asked me, what's the best way to track progress? You know, is it the scale? Is it BMI? Circumference measurements? What's the best thing? And so this video I'm going to talk about that, and this is definitely something you're going to want to share with anybody who has the scale as their number one goal. Check it out. So what I'm talking about here is tracking your progress as it relates to fitness. And why do we do this? Well, that's an easy answer. It's to know when you're making progress. You know, the more things you can put numbers on, the more apparent and obvious that things are happening. You know, it's hard just to, go by the mirror or how your clothes are fitting, and those are great, and I think those are awesome, but it's always nice to put some hard numbers behind it. So let's talk through the different methods that you can do that, and what's good about them and what's not so good about them. First thing let's talk about is the scale. I mean, this is the obvious one that everybody always focuses on. Now, the thing that the scale does is it's very easy. You know, you hop on it. Most everybody has one at their house. It's immediate feedback. You don't have to wait around for it. You don't have to have anybody else do it for you. However, the drawbacks are that there's a lot of variables that go into the scale. Okay, so let's go through those. One is muscle mass. You know, muscle has density and weight, so the more muscle, the more the scale is going to show. Obviously, body fat, you know, that's probably the reason why we're all looking at this. More body fat, the higher the number. Your hydration levels. You know, your body is about 70% water. So, I mean, if your hydration levels are up or down, it's going to affect the scale. And then one that a lot of people don't think about is your digestive system. You know, how much intestinal bulk do you have going through you at that time? It's kind of gross, but it's true. So those are all variables. And finally, clothes. You know, unless you're in your birthday suit, you know, that can be a factor too. And you know, it's amazing how much even a pair of shoes weigh. You know, you go to the doctor's office and you hop on the scale and full clothes, maybe a jacket, long sleeve shirt, jeans, something in your pockets, it's going to make an impact. So those are the things that can throw that off, and why the scale is not a good number to look at. You know, if somebody's got increased muscle mass, but their body fat's the same, well, the good thing is their metabolism is going higher because of that, and that's actually going to help them in the long term. But if you look at the scale, all people see is that number going up, the alarms go off and they freak out, and they actually start reducing their muscle mass, all trying to get that number down. That's a bad thing. Okay, so let's talk about this next one, body fat percentage. So what this is, it's a test, and there's a lot of different methods to do it. There's skin folds, bioimpedance, hydrostatic weighing, bod pod, but all of these tests, the idea there is to determine how much body fat you have on your physique. What is the percentage of body fat compared to your lean mass? The good thing about this is you're starting to talk about the separation of just weight. Okay, you're starting to say, okay, this is muscle, this is fat. Muscle good, fat not good. Okay, so people are getting on the right track with looking at the difference between the two and saying, okay, we just want to focus on body fat. But the challenge with this is there's a high margin of error, you know, at least 3%. However, usually it's higher than that depending on the test, variability. You know, some of the cheaper methods, you know, depends on hydration levels, a lot of different things. Myself, I like to use the old skin calipers, you know, and doing the old pinch test to determine body fat. But all those methods, they do have a margin of error. The other thing that's kind of hindrance is they're a little bit invasive. You know, if you do hydrostatic weighing, you know, you get down, do like a swimsuit, and you got to hold yourself in this little ball in this tank of water, and it's tough. I've done it. You know, the skin folds, you know, depending on the person, sometimes that's not an accurate measurement, depending on where they store their body fat, also that comfort level of that person. So there's different things that, you know, can hinder it. But again, it's better than some other methods, but it's still probably not the best thing to track. The other thing about body fat is it takes a while to show a change. You know, it's not something that you're going to get quick changes over time. It's gonna be slow. So, you know, if somebody's looking for that, you know, constant feedback loop and that motivation, body fat's going to take a little longer to show that progress. So let's talk about the one that's probably the worst, even worse than the scale, and that is BMI. They take your height and your weight, and then they put a ratio together and factor it. Okay, so your BMI, anything over 25 is considered overweight or obese. Now, there's some obvious issues with this. But first, let me talk about what's good. And the only thing that's good about this is that it's easy to figure. It's easy to calculate. You know, anybody with a calculator, a scale, and a measuring stick can see what that is. Unfortunately, a lot of insurance companies use it as a way to regulate and gauge insurance rates and health, but don't get me started on that. And it's direct, it's quick, you can do it, you know, it's really easy to get that number. The downside is, you know, obviously, you know, somebody who has any sort of appreciated or heaviest, muscle. If you have muscle, it's not a very good way to measure because you're going to weigh more. It's like we talked earlier about the scale. And so that's going to throw people off. In fact, again, the numbers, anything above 25, a study showed that the average collegiate athlete, they actually took hockey players, was 26, 27 BMI. I mean, right there, you're taking a collegiate athlete and you're showing that they're overweight. Come on. So it's not a very good way to measure your progress. About the only thing it can do, though, is if somebody's too thin, if they're underweight, and they show up in the BMI, then there's an issue there. That's probably the only way that has any validity or should be even looked at. The next measurement is circumference measurements. Now, this entails taking a tape measure, you know, and measuring various body parts, you know, the waist, the arms, your thighs, your hips, those different types of things, you know, to see what the circumference measurements are. Now, what is good about it is you're starting to get into some practical, real feedback that probably correlates with how your clothes fit. You know, obviously, if your waist is down, your pants are going to feel a little bit better, you know, and those types of things. Now, a couple of the drawbacks to circumference measurements. One is it's a little tricky to do, you know, to get that tape measure around you, although all the guys are really good about measuring their arms. I think you get that in middle school. But it's a little tricky, and then also consistency. You know, you got to make sure that you get the same area, get the same, you know, different factors. You know, you don't want to be pumped up or you know, empty or whatever. The other challenge to circumference measurements is you can kind of start to focus more on just the measurement than the reason why you have that measurement. You know, again, if all you're seeing is the numbers and not the why behind it, you know, you might start looking at like, oh, I just want to get that number down and forget about muscle tissue and the things that are actually going to drive your metabolism and help you from that standpoint. The other thing that's a drawback on circumference measurements is it does take time. Okay, you're not going to see, you know, week to week changes usually on these circumference measurements. So you do have to have some patience with that and see those changes over time. Okay, let's talk about the final measurement, and that is measuring your output, your activity, your training log. Okay, this is measuring what you're doing with your daily exercise. Now, this could be a whole host of things. You know, it could be tracking the weight you lift, the number of times you lift it, the number of sets, all of the above. It could be the duration of an endurance activity. It could be your average heart rate. Any of those things, all of those things show you the results of your activity, which this is the process. And your process is what drives your progress, okay? So the nice thing about your training log is it's immediate. Like seriously, you do an exercise, you're immediately gonna see the progress right there. And then you can go back and say, okay, when did I do that last time? Am I better? Am I worse? How much better am I? And that's immediate. And again, going back to the why we're tracking these things, it's for knowing that you're getting better, and that drives motivation. And so if you see that you're doing better in the process, you're going to improve in the progress. It's going to happen. And that's motivating. It's instantaneous. The other good thing is it's anybody can do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy. It could be old school on a piece of paper, whatever. But then you go back in, and next time you go to that workout, you go to that training session, you can go back and look and see what you did before and immediately get better. Okay? Now, there is one drawback. It takes work. It takes work figuratively and literally. I mean, you have to get to the gym, do your training in order to write down the process. So that's going to take work. Also, yes, there is a little bit of work involving, writing things down, taking numbers. I mean, tons of apps out there. It's not too hard. But you go back in there and then you go back and review that training log, and that's going to help you know. I can promise you, if your training log constantly shows process improvement, you're getting better at what you're doing, you're going to make progress. I guarantee it. So we talked through all these different ways to track numbers, dice them, slice them, and analyze things. So don't go paralysis by analysis. Just go get out and get things happening. But again, the best method is train log, get after it. Those other numbers, yes, you can look at them, and yes, I think they are good to track, but you don't want to focus on any one thing, okay? Spread it out, look at big picture, and again, focus on the process. That's what drives the progress. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like it, share it with others. Again, those people that are really looking at those scale numbers only. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And thank you for watching. Until next time, keep making every day count.